There will be no joy in Mudville. Mighty Steph has airballed out to the Warriors, take a tough loss versus the shorthanded Knicks. Speaking of shorthanded, the Cavaliers get a big win versus the Pacers without Donovan Mitchell. Plus, we'll take a look around the rest of the association, the Western Conference playoff picture, and who's more cooked between the Warriors or the Heat. And do we really need March basketball in the NBA? We'll talk about all that and more on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by David Ramil. He is co-host of Locked On Heat. You can catch me on Locked On Nuggets. We're going to talk about all sorts of things tonight. We'll talk about the New York Knicks and their big win over the Golden State Warriors. Talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers getting a very solid win versus the Indiana Pacers, and David's thoughts on Tyrese Haliburton and some of his struggles lately. We'll talk about who's more cooked between the Warriors and the Heat. We'll talk a little bit about March basketball and some of the struggles as well, as I want to get David's thoughts on the officiating and how we've kind of reverted back to 90s basketball and when this will probably get evened out. We'll hitch on all the night's games and more on tonight's episode of Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Thanks for being an everydayer. Checking us out Monday through Friday. You can catch us tonight, and then tomorrow on Wednesday, John Corrales and Jake Madison. Thursdays, Pat the Designer and Nick Angstadt, and on Fridays, Wes Goldberg and Adam Mares. All right, David, let's start here. The Golden State Warriors, fresh off of that big win versus the Los Angeles Lakers on Saturday when AD was out, and there was about 95 minutes of stoppage in a game that was an outright PR disaster for the league. Like, I looked at like Google News because I was traveling that day, and like all of the headlines were about how bad of a look that was for the league. So the Warriors are back in action, and there's a Warriors account I enjoy very much. It's Natfluential. She works for NBC Bay Area, and she was talking about like, you know, the 6th seed is still within range. They can still get the 6th seed. And I'm like, can you though? Like, can you get the 6th seed? And then sure enough, they lose to the New York Knicks, who, by the way, are without OG Anunoby. Anunoby, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, is going to miss some time with a flare-up in the elbow that's given him problems. And yet the Knicks just get it done. This team is so tough, man. They get it done behind 34 points for Jalen Brunson and 29 for Miles McBride, ? McBride goes for 9 of 13 from the field, 6 of 9 from 3. Miles McBride had 6 3-pointers. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson combined for 9. So, like, that's a pretty good ratio if you were the New York Knicks. I have a lot of thoughts kind of on the Warriors, but I do want to credit the Knicks for getting this win. They are without Julius Randle. They're without Mitchell Robinson. They're without OG Anunoby. And they still go into the Bay and they get it done. And I think this is one of those games that, to me, it's a non-conference game, which I usually tend to be like, whatever. This is a game that I think tells us a lot about both squads, and it was an impressive win for the Knicks.
I agree. We talked about this last week. The Knicks, a really solid team, a really tough matchup, and Brunson continues to be one of the best players in the league. He's so exciting and fun to watch, at least from my perspective. I think he's a great player. To get that kind of performance McBride, certainly unexpected and a big part of why they won today, but they probably would have found somebody else to step up if it hadn't been McBride. That's just the way the season has gone for New York. And Josh Hart continues to play every available minute, and he probably played a full second game after this was over, according to Tom Thibodeau. Like, he probably had him out there again. He played all 48 minutes, had a triple-double tonight. They're a really good team, really balanced, and they just continue to compete hard. Every game is a must-win for them. At least that's the way it looks on the floor. They're very, very difficult to knock out. And Jalen Brunson, he just keeps going and going and going. He keeps finding a way to attack, and he's really physical, embraces the changes in the officiating, and he loves to draw contact, but he loves to get to his spots. And when that shot's falling, he's even more dangerous. So he's a really, really good player.
Something kind of interesting in this game was Steph Curry has seen some of the biggest impacts on his game since the officiating started changing. And one of the reasons is because if you kind of notice, they're allowing a lot more off-ball contact. You can hold, you can grab, you can pull. Now, Curry got in the line for 7 free throws tonight, hit all 7 of them. And so he was getting the whistle that he kind of needed in this one. Curry's game was a little bit, his line is a little bit, it's not indicative of how the game went for this one because Curry finishes with 27 points, but he was at like 22 with about 2 minutes to go and would just start chucking. Look, I'll be honest, I've never been really able to tell the difference between Steph Curry chucking and Steph Curry shooting an actual shot because they look very similar to me. He airballed twice and then knocked one in. That was kind of made it, I think, 6 late, but it wasn't nearly enough. I do think I am at this point with the Warriors I've been thinking about this a lot. I had to drive for about 12 hours this weekend. And so I was had a lot of time to my thoughts. One of the things that came across my mind was just like the Warriors and these teams in the play-in, they keep telling us who they are. Like, they keep yelling at us and being like, hey, we're not very good. Like the Lakers and Warriors keep being like, we're not very good. Like we're just not very good teams. And yet we don't really believe them. We're like, oh boy, look out. Like the Thunder, the Lakers could upset the Thunder. And like, that is a bad matchup. Like that's legitimately a bad matchup. And the Warriors mystique, I think, goes a long way. This is what's tough because on one hand, we know that the playoffs are such a different animal than the regular season. And that's never been more true than now. Like the playoffs are just treated so entirely different. They're officiated differently. They're not really officiated differently anymore, but they're played so differently. The intensity level is so different, the tactical matchups, etc. On the other hand, we do have a long-standing history that basically the best teams in the regular season are the ones that advance in the playoffs. Like we do not see a lot of teams advance deep into the playoffs that were not good in the regular season, except for last year when 2 play-in tournament teams made the conference finals and one made the finals. So help me out with this. How much should I bury the Golden State Warriors here?
I think the concern is Steph Curry is just not nearly as dynamic as he has been. Like he can't take over games to the same degree he once did. And I think tonight was indicative of that. And that being the case, you're not getting the same production from the regular cast of characters. I mean, Klay Thompson coming off the bench, you're starting a rookie and Patinski, you're relying on guys like Jonathan Kuminga and Draymond Green and whatever version of him you're going to get on a night-to-night basis. So they're still trying to figure out this roster and put all these players together, relying on that mystique to kind of carry them through. And you have the occasional moment where they pop and you're going, oh yeah, okay, this feels more like the team that they should be, but they don't maintain it. And you're looking at their upcoming schedule, it's not going to get easier for them. I mean, there's a legitimate chance that they might not be able to even hold on to that play-in spot. So, I don't know. The Warriors, I still think of them as dangerous. I can't help it. And maybe that's part of the problem here is that I tend to keep thinking of them, in that one spot. If they go into a matchup and if they get past the play-in and they match up and maybe everything breaks right, they could be dangerous. Is that a fault of mine? I don't know. It could be. I tend to rely on what I've seen in the past as an indicator of the future, and maybe that's too far back in terms of my view of this team. Maybe I should just be looking at what they are this season. And they're an older team that's, kind of lost and misguided at times. So I don't know. I still think that they're a capable team, but we just don't see it consistently enough to maintain that.
The best way to approach this is to not have an opinion and then play confirmation bias after it happens. If the Warriors lose in the play-in tournament, I mean, are you surprised? They weren't good all year. Like, we just should have accepted this team is not good. And if they make a run, are you really surprised? This is a team that won 4 championships. You can't count them out. Just don't have an opinion and then claim that you knew all along. That's the secret with the Golden State Warriors.
There you go.
Knicks got a win that was when they were shorthanded. On the other side, a number of other teams also did. And we'll talk about those teams and how they got some victories, missing some key guys up next here on Locked On NBA. Right now, I'll tell you about Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style, size, and budget, and they do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. You get to easily upgrade your wardrobe with a professional stylist that helps you find new, on-trend favorites that will work for you. You just give your stylist your size, style, and budget preferences. You can order boxes when you want and how you want, no subscription required. They'll send you 5 just for you pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. You get to keep what works, and then you just send back the rest. Stitch Fix makes it all so easy. You don't like to shop? Well, they're going to save you that time and effort. Plus, you get outfits that are going to make you look and feel really good. And if you don't love something, just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free with Stitch Fix. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. As you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars because on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, you're going to get the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. You can find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Back here with David Ramil here on a Tuesday. Thanks for hanging out with us. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Tuesday. All right, let's get into some of the other scores from around the association tonight, David, as Cleveland Cavaliers got a good win versus the Indiana Pacers. No Donovan Mitchell, no Evan Mobley. And Darius Garland had 13 points on 18 shots in this one, but they got great games from Jared Allen, who chipped in 23 on just 12 shots, and Karis LeVert, who's having a really good season. Karis is maddening in his inconsistency. Karis LeVert's been fantastic this year, and he had 23 points on 7 of 15 shooting, 8 of 11 from the line, 8 boards, and 11 assists. LeVert's been killing it in playmaking lately as the Cavs get the win versus Indiana in Indiana, 108-103. This is a really fun game. Tyrese Haliburton, 14 points, 6 rebounds, 12 assists, but he had 14 points on 14 shots. He has just not looked right. And this, to me, is a very strong indicator, the way that Hallie has played. This is a very strong indicator to me of why I would like to see the 65-game limit removed. I was very much in favor of it. I was very much supportive of it. I think it's important that the players play. It's been great to see things like the Clippers play their dudes on back-to-backs. We've had a lot better performance in terms of the available healthy players playing. Even more so than the Joel Embiid situation, Tyrese Haliburton very clearly is not right and very clearly is trying to play to get the 65 games and try and make it into all-NBA consideration. And that to me is like a huge problem where he's talked about this, about his frustrations with it and the issues that are going on with it. And so for me, like I look at this as like whether it's for the 65 games or whether it's more because he's just trying to get the team right and he feels like he has to. Like Haliburton is one of the most efficient scorers we've seen. And boy, has he struggled lately. He is not right. Caitlin Cooper's done threads on it. All of his balance is off in terms of his legs. Like he's one of the best off-balance shooters, but his balance looks way off. And that just makes the Pacers into a much less team. I think they're a better squad with Pascal Siakam. I like the way they're playing, but they need Tyrese Haliburton to be the guy again.
Yeah, he looks joyless out there and kind of rendered mediocre too, because he's not as dangerous as he had been earlier in the season. I think I saw the statistic earlier that he's been shooting since coming back from the hamstring 28% from 3-point range, and I might be off on that number. I might be misremembering, but I mean it was such a significant component of why the Pacers were so dangerous and running up these incredible scores and everything else, and without Haliburton being able to put up those numbers, the assist numbers feel kind of flat because he's not putting up the points of his own. And so they can't play at the same pace they were. They keep pushing the ball, trying to score and trying to outscore people. But even, on a night when you have a limited Cavaliers team, they're able to contend. If they get enough scoring, they can defend just as easily and be able to lock down what the Pacers are able to do. And so it kind of, it works against them. Yeah, as far as the 65-game limit, I'm with you. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how to fix it because I understand the league's perspective of wanting to get players out there so they don't take more breaks and things of that sort. But you don't want a player playing through injury because then ultimately what the league is banking on in terms of getting those extra views during the playoffs, I think that's a diminished product, right? You can't have these players go out there and be shades of themselves. Like this was a coming out season for Haliburton in many ways. Like as much as we might have known about him before, being in Indiana, being an all-star in Indianapolis, etc. Like there were a lot of opportunities for Haliburton to become one of the next faces of the league and things of that sort, and to lead into the playoffs. And you're not getting that. You're getting a very limited version of who that player is. And so there's got to be some way of remedying that. And I don't know. I guess the coaches can't say, sorry, we can't play you because they don't have other options on the bench that can produce this to the same level, even the limited version of who Haliburton is. So I don't know. It's a really, really tough call, especially when money is tied into it, that's the point that I've made for a long, long time. I hate the fact that those are tied into contracts. I don't think that should be something that the collective bargaining agreement, the Players Association agreed to, but it's all under the bridge at this point.
That might be like the best way to actually address this, honestly, is keep the 65 game rule, but don't make it tied to money. Like don't make those awards eligible for the extensions. Because really, like, it's like, oh, I want to be all NBA. Like, yeah, you want to be all NBA, but you probably still just be like, I'll get it next year, versus like I only get to make an extra $60 million once. Turns out that's probably a little bit more valuable than a trophy. Elsewhere, another shorthanded team, the Philadelphia 76ers, who have been dreadful without Joel Embiid, get a big win versus the Miami Heat. Miami without Jimmy Butler, Miami without Tyler Hero, plus or minus. Tyrese Maxey with 30 points, 8 rebounds, 10 assists. I missed this one, David, so tell me what happened and how does Miami score 91 points in this game that was brought forth to us from the 90s?
Yeah, it was a tough watch. It was really ugly, very, very physical. I thought, and maybe I'm feeling a little biased here. I thought there were some missed calls either way, but certainly against Miami where they were trying to draw contact and weren't getting it. But that's on them because they weren't finishing at the rim at a high level either. That should be the priority. I know they've become a little over-reliant, especially with Jimmy trying to get to the line and boost those scoring numbers, but they just weren't getting it done. And Bam Adebayo was solid. Terry Rozier, inefficient, but solid as well at his scoring. They just don't have enough of a scoring punch. They weren't getting production for anybody on the second night of a back-to-back. And then they were down 17 at one point, and that was due to Tyrese Maxey having a huge game. As you mentioned before, he was unstoppable, really, really solid. He was dialed up early on and often. And then late in the game, Miami, as they often do, mounted a comeback, but they just fell short. And they defended Bam late in the game, too, denied him the ball. So he wasn't able to get much scoring going at that point in time. And then eventually the Sixers just cruised to an easy win. But it was a significant game in terms of Eastern Conference standings and everything else like that. A game that I'm sure Miami would love to have back. I'm curious to see how they bounce back on Wednesday when they go into Cleveland to take on those same shorthanded Cavaliers. So 2 shorthanded teams facing against each other with significant implications, but it'll be a fun watch.
We'll circle back to There's 2 shorthanded teams playing one another at this point in the season for important standings a little bit later in the third segment. I'm looking this up right now. Yeah, so Sixers cut the season series lead. It's now 2-1 Heat with 1 to play. So Sixers can split season series with Miami, but they can't win the tiebreaker outright. Last one in terms of the shorthanded, the Minnesota Timberwolves get a win without Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns. You should go YouTube Anthony Edwards dunk Jazz. Just go, you put those words in and witness the destruction that Anthony Edwards wrought from the heavens. Edwards goes for 32 points on 13 of 23, 7 boards, 8 assists for Ant-Man tonight. Phenomenal game. Jazz kind of got out to a lead. I will say this is one of the things, if you're not somebody that's watched the Wolves a lot, I want to kind of like, if this keeps up in the playoffs, maybe it won't, but like if their trends keep up in the playoffs, don't be surprised if Minnesota goes down early. Like the Wolves are a slow starter team. You're going to notice that the Wolves go down early a lot, and then like they get better and better as the game goes on. And what really winds up happening is like they start slow, they destroy you in the second quarter, they get a lead in the third quarter to where it's a pretty sizable lead, and then they kind of hang on. They're not necessarily elite in the clutch. They're just able to build a lead, and they're very good at holding it with that defense. But Utah, obviously, in a very different spot in their season. But again, another Wolves team that gets a shorthanded win this time versus the Jazz. The Wolves face the Nuggets tomorrow night on a back-to-back in an absolutely massive game with Western Conference playoff implications. We'll see whether or not Rudy Gobert is able to give it a go in that one. On the other side, I want to talk to David a little bit more. We'll wrap up the rest of the conversations around the league with the games, as well as I want to get David's thoughts on the officiating, how these games are being played, and a look at March basketball in the NBA. And here's a question. Do we really need it? We'll talk about that on the other side here on Locked On NBA. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I got a really good friend of mine that just got basically his dream job, and he was actually able to find it through LinkedIn Jobs. He put in all of the right things into his resume, got himself the right keywords, and it wasn't just the applications and skills. It was also the character qualities and the experience, and the combination of factors for them to find him. And this is the right fit for him. And I'm really excited for him. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which make it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. And it does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring's easy when you've got that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's a really good rate. LinkedIn knows that the small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why it's so important to use LinkedIn Jobs. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us, making this part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us, Matt Moore and David Ramil. I'm coming to you from my parents' basement because I had to take my kids out to see their grandparents. So I like a good blogger. I'm coming to you live from my mom's basement. All right, let's talk a little bit about this. Oh, a couple of more things. The Celtics beat the Pistons. I am not going to explain this game to you. Like, you should, if you follow this show, I should not have to break down Celtics Pistons for you. The Celtics are very good. The Pistons are very not. They won by 25. The end. Elsewhere, the Sacramento Kings got an overtime win versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Grizzlies with Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson back. By the way, credit to Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson for playing out the string of games in a lost season. Pretty impressed with them. Keon Ellis played some really great defense down the stretch, but the story for the Kings is Malik Monk, who probably salted away Sixth Man of the Year with his performance, quite honestly. 28 points, 10 of 19 shooting, 7 of 7 from the free throw line, only 1 of 6 from the stripe, but he did grab 6 boards and 6 assists in this one, a plus 19 for Malik Monk. De'Aaron Fox with 23, 7, and 10. And Domantas Sabonis keeps his double-double streak going with 25 points and 18 rebounds, like one does. Grizzly did a really good job to force this into overtime, but couldn't get quality looks down the stretch. David, so I want to kind of get this to you. We talked about this. No Jimmy, no Tyler versus no Embiid in the Sixers. No Rudy, no Cat versus the Jazz, who are also shorthanded. The Knicks are without 3 starters. This was always kind of my thing last year with the Lakers and their run, and I understand they made a conference finals, but you really need to understand these teams. I just want to try and warn fans of this. These games are being played right now. All games in the NBA are played for money. These games are only being played for money. Like, we know how good these teams are. We know which teams belong in the playoffs and which don't. We know which teams are probably going to have a chance to compete for a championship and which ones most likely are not. And yet, we have to go through this last stretch of games, and it is messy and it is ugly, and there are still back-to-backs and 3rd and 4. And this is the time of the year when, I look at the schedule, and sometimes we get these really special, awesome games. But a lot of the time, we just get a lot of mess with guys that are exhausted on back-to-backs and bad travel and banged up and shorthanded. Like, Josh Hart's been playing 48 minutes a night for what feels like 3 weeks. That poor guy's legs are going to fall off. It's not going to change. I understand the money and the dynamics, and I kind of accept those things. But my big problem, and one of the reasons where I really got to feeling like they needed to shorten the schedule, and I used to be an 82-game truther, being like, I love the 82 games. Yeah. I changed my mind on it, and it's largely because of this stretch of time, when this should be the time that we're ramping up for the playoffs, when it's key matchups, and like tomorrow night's a perfect example of this. The Minnesota Timberwolves are facing the Denver Nuggets. That's a 2 seed versus the 3 seed in a division matchup. The Wolves still have an outside shot. The 1 is 1-0 Timberwolves in the season series. This game matters a ton for both teams. This could be the difference in home court in a second round series with a chance to go to the conference finals. And the Wolves are on a road. They've traveled from road home back to Minnesota, coming off of altitude, and they're missing 2 guys because, look, you could be missing those guys early, but it's more likely you're going to accumulate injuries as the season goes on. They could be without Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns and Naz Reid got hit in the face. So, like, could be without Naz Reid as well. These games are so messy, David. It does make me wonder about March in particular and the problems with this spot in the schedule and the value of these games.
I don't know. I don't think I agree with you on that. I think you just hinted at it. When is the peak NBA season? Is it just the playoffs then? Because that's part of the problem, is that we keep selling it as such. We keep talking about it's all going to matter in the playoffs. It's all going to change in the playoffs. All of a sudden, everything's ramped up. But it's not like the playoffs aren't decided by the occasional injury or something like that. A player misses time, and it happens. And you start the season in October, right? And that's ugly basketball because they're still really rusty and everybody's coming off of preseason. If you even play in the preseason, etc., an injury takes out your team. And then you've got the holidays and that kind of impacts everything. You kind of start to peak around then, but then you start getting into February. You're looking forward to the All-Star break and teams start to slow down. And then teams are coming back from the All-Star break and they're still a little sluggish, a little rusty. So, and then that leads into March. And then, by April, you just want, there are obvious teams that have nothing to play for at that point in time. They're looking forward to the offseason already, if they're not already in that mode mentally and emotionally. And so we can't keep just talking about the obvious problem, or not the obvious problem, the problems that we see or that we want to see. I don't have a problem with these games. I know it's difficult. I know that there are injuries impacting a lot of these games in March, but it's not like these injuries don't happen all year round, whether it's the playoffs or the preseason.
Like it, though. Like, it feels like, like a guy gets hurt in like January. But like, does it feel like this where I look up and down the roster? Like, look at the games that we talked about in second segment where we're like, no Donovan Mitchell, no Evan Mobley, no Joel Embiid, no Jimmy Butler, no Tyler Hero, no Nikola Jovic, no who else was out? Like, all of these games, all of the Knicks, all of the Knicks are out except Jalen Brunson. That's the thing, is like, when I look up and down the schedule and I see so many, that's where it stands out more to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get it. I there's so much wrought into that though, with players having to go through these things, the injuries, I guess they do pile up and there is obvious physical exhaustion and everything else like that. But I don't know. I kind of feel like there's a need to downplay. I don't, the schedule is never getting shortened. And so moving with that kind of idea that it's never getting shortened just makes things a lot easier. Just let go. Just gotta let it go. It's not going to change.
Fair. That's fair. I think though, if we're going to let it go, that's fine. But I do think we need to keep this in mind, is that if you're a team who your team is struggling and you're like, boy, I don't know, we played like crap in March. This isn't a real month of basketball. And if your team that's like, we're surging, we're playing right well, just the right time, the history says that's not true. Like, there is a very low correlation between playoff success and your performance after the All-Star break to the end of the season. It's just very rare. So, maybe take all of this with a grain of salt, which is to say, like, yeah, like, these games count and these games aren't going anywhere. But I also have a hard time, in most cases, extrapolating a lot of, this is the problem really, is that I've come to be addicted to stakes in games. And the absence of them makes it difficult for me, and I think a lot of fans, but some things are unavoidable, and that's just kind of the way it goes.
Eric Spoelstra is fond of saying that over the course of the season, he likes building positive trends. That might necessarily not result in a win or a loss or whatever, but that you want to be playing better basketball as the season progresses. Do you see the league as a whole doing that? I can't speak for Miami because Miami has been so battered and up and down. I can't figure out who the hell that team is anyway. I don't think anybody can. But as a whole of the league, do you think teams progress positively, at least the teams that are supposed to, as you said, make the playoffs?
I think they do, but I think the difference is, like, I think they progress from October until late January. And then you're into, we're distracted because we're going on vacation for All-Star in 2 weeks. And then after the All-Star break, it's largely guys are injured, teams are tanking, or teams are coasting. And so that to me is like, yes, you do get, like, you do improve, but your goal should be to improve between October and late January. But my problem is just that everything then gets so weird, so wonky, and hard to determine that it's hard, I think, for you to measure your progress because of how messy things can be. Elsewhere, though, I want to get your thoughts on this. the officiating has obviously continues to be. We saw some scores tonight that were just absolutely brutal. The Warriors had 14 points in the fourth quarter. You watched a 98-91 game, which is just amazing. Detroit scored 94 points. The Blazers put up 107. The Jazz, even though they're an offensive team, scored 104, albeit versus a very good defense in Utah. Kings Grizzlies was 121-111 in overtime. The Pacers, one of the high-profile offenses, 103. We continue to see these very low-scoring games, and there were sequences late in the game in the Kings Grizzlies game where it was just like hilarious how much contact they were allowing. I think we're going to start to see some backlash to the change, and the NBA swears up and down they haven't sent out any sort of memo. It's my reaction to that is to kind of laugh and be like, okay, what a coincidence that all of the officials decided to just stop calling obvious fouls.
I thought there was reporting that a memo had been sent out about these officials. Is it the league denying that the memo came out?
Yeah, so like their whole thing is there's a very like distinct difference in how the wording is. The biggest thing is that the league is very much advocating that they're like, we're not trying to lower scores. But I think there probably has been like a change in the interpretation of some of the rules. The teams certainly feel that way. But I want to get your thoughts on it. How do you feel watching these games?
I'm having a hard time adjusting to it. And, that's somebody who watched these older games, that again, as somebody who covered the Heat, or not cover at that point in time, but somebody who's been watching the Heat for a long time, 90 to 78 should be right in my wheelhouse, right? I mean, that's perfectly the Miami Heat basketball during the clashes with the New York Knicks in the playoffs and everything else. But at the same time, the game has changed so much that I've become perhaps a little used to seeing it. And it's surprising sometimes, as you pointed out, like there were drives in that Kings game where, obviously somebody was getting beat up on the way to the hoop, Malik Monk and et cetera. They were taking these hits on the way to the basket, not getting calls. And I'm like, shouldn't that have been an and one? I mean, especially with the higher stakes of a potential overtime at stake here. And so I don't know. I'm just a little curious. Like I talked about it with the Heat too, like the Heat and Jimmy Butler in particular, I've gotten kind of accustomed to getting these calls, and without them, they've been rendered somewhat mediocre over the last week. I mean, you made the point last week that you thought Miami would benefit. It has not helped them at all. They have actually not gotten those calls, and they have not been able to put up decent scoring numbers as a result. So it's a little difficult to watch, but I guess aesthetically, I enjoy it because the game should just have a flow to it. Just you take the contact, you move on. And I think if you do this enough, eventually it'll change collectively amongst NBA players. Well, they will not be looking for these fouls because they won't be getting those calls. And that's how you kind of have to make that change. You just have to change. You have to rewire the players after the last couple of decades of thinking that they're going to get these calls into believing that they're not going to get them. And as such, it might lead to more aesthetically pleasing basketball. So it's an adjustment for me, but overall, I guess I'm mostly positive, but it has been difficult.
I love it. I love it so much. I can't get enough of it. I had, a friend of mine, Jared Dubin, who does great work, was like, boy, I'm concerned, like they're not calling obvious fouls. And I'm like, if they die, they die. Like, that's how I feel, is like, let them suffer, let them figure it out. Cause I love watching the struggle. It should be hard. This is the NBA. It should be hard. And I just personally really enjoy it. You're still getting some dominant performances. You're still getting these great scoring performances. You're still getting great basketball. It's just a little bit harder. And I really appreciate that. That's going to do it for Locked On NBA. Appreciate you guys being with us. Thanks for joining us. Hope you guys have yourselves a great week. Tomorrow, you've got Jake Madison, John Corrales. On Thursday, Patho Designer, Nick Angstadt. And on Friday, Wes Goldberg and Adam Mares. Make sure to keep it tuned right here on Locked On NBA. We'll see you guys again next time.